Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Powerful Man Show. I am your host, Tim Matthews, with my co-host on a fly on the wall, Mo, the powerful woman, Parks, and Gerod, the powerful man, Rush. How are you doing, guys?
Hey,
Good.
good.
Yeah. So I know Doug's going to listen to this episode and think, why the hell is there three of you on there? Well, the reason for that is because we were just recording some episodes with Gerod. He heard that Mo was coming on. He's a big fan of Mo and all that she does for the movement. So one, Gerod wanted to meet her, and two, he said, "Hey, can I be a fly on the wall, and maybe I can share some stuff on the subject?" So why not? So for those of you that don't know, Mo is one of the advisors, the Powerful Man. So she speaks with the men when they are interested about joining the activation method or the brotherhood or one of the various programs. And what she does is she gives a woman's perspective on what is going on in the relationship and what gets to happen in order to fix things. And by this point, she's had several hundred conversations with the men. And there's a particular pattern that she has been noticing lately that she wanted to talk about in the hope that it could serve some of the other guys. So, do you want to share what it is, Mo, that's been coming up on these calls lately?
Yeah, for sure. So, like Tim said, I talked to a lot of guys, and often when they get on the phone, there is some sort of intimacy break. So, whether that's physical and like the sexual area has kind of been cut off or lowered, or whether that's been more emotional and she's just kind of withdrawing. Typically, what I'm seeing in these situations as we get into them, as we walk through them, is a lot of reactivity from the men and a lot of codependency. So, that's the basis of the problem that I'm seeing.
Okay. So, I think it'd be smart for us to just define codependency because, when I've spoken to this about them, spoken about this to the men, oftentimes they say, well, what is codependency? What does that look like? What does it mean? And I get it. There was a time when, I didn't understand it either. So what I'm going to do is read out 9 warning signs of a codependent relationship. And as you listen to these guys, and even Mo and Gerod, I want you to just take stock and look at how many of these you might be hearing the men talk about, Mo. And I guess Gerod, you can also look at whether these maybe showed up in your own life, and you guys listening too. So anyway, 9 warning signs of a codependent relationship. Number 1, people pleasing. Right. Number 2, a lack of boundaries. Number 3, poor self-esteem. So often we'll see guys that have let their needs go. They've stopped working out. They don't dress very well. They've stopped taking care of how they look. They don't follow their hobbies. All those things are symptoms of a poor self-esteem. Caretaking. So wanting to caretake for the other person in the relationship, right? And oftentimes when people caretake, they will form subconscious agreements and commitments with the other person that aren't ever spoken about. And it's kind of like, hey, if I do this thing, then you will do this for me. Kind of like tit for tat as well. For a lot of guys, that might be, hey, I go out there and I make all the money, so you should want to have sex with me, for example. The 5th one is reactivity, kind of like deer. 6th one is poor communication. 7 is a lack of self-image. So this could go to self-esteem, but also self-image is really knowing who you are and what you stand for. 8th one is dependency. Kind of comes hand in hand with the caretaker to a degree, but really putting your needs on the other person because it's their responsibility to make you happy. And the 9th one is relationship stress, right? When you can't communicate or respect boundaries, you're bound to have problems. The caretaker often feels a lot of stress about doing everything right, while the dependent person often feels insecure about being abandoned by the caretaker. Both are afraid to be alone, but neither is particularly happy. There may not be many fights since one partner is typically committed to keeping the other happy, but both are likely to feel stressed nonetheless.
Yeah. Yeah, this is huge. I think these are big things that I see are basically just decision makers. When we get to see these guys coming in, a lot of times this is the stuff that's holding them back from actually doing a program, investing in the program. And what I see like more often than not is that whole I'll work on this if she works on this. when the reality is that's probably the thing that's killing the relationship in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. A lot of guys can often be terrified, and I get it, of rocking the boat, right? They're in a codependent relationship, or at least they might. It's up to you whether you're prescribed to any of those. I think even if you resonate with 6 or 7 out of the 9, that's a high percentage. The chances are you could categorize yourself as being in a codependent relationship. And in that place where the relationship isn't working out, the guys can often be terrified of quote unquote rocking the boat, right? In case it make things worse. Yeah, I'm curious to hear what you think about this, but my guess is that the woman wants the guy to rock the boat, because in rocking the boat, what he's going to do is essentially begin to lead himself and the relationship out of this place of codependency.
Yeah, yeah, I'd say that's a huge piece that when guys think of rocking the boat, they almost think of that as entirely negative. And while at first, like there may be some like chaos there because she's so used to a pattern where he's not providing in a certain way, whether that's safety or meeting her emotional needs. But yeah, often when they rock the boat, she can move out of that place of feeling closed because the reality is like when he feels that lack of certainty and that and he's putting that codependency on her like I'm okay if we're okay, she's going to do one of two things. She's going to either feel super heavy and just take up the weight and try to change the relationship on her own, or she's going to crumble and just and feel closed off. In both of those places, she's going to close herself off to intimacy, whether that's physical or emotional.
So true. And episode 441 and 442, that's where Mo talks about a woman's take on what it means for the man to lead and a woman's take on what it means for a man to take responsibility. I think both of those feed into this, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
So I'm curious. I mean, what's you mentioned it there a little bit, but I'm curious to dive in a little bit more about what's going on for the woman in this place of codependency. Um, as it relates as well to what the guys are telling you that they're seeing in their relationship, that the guys are just kind of missing.
Yeah, I think one of the things it comes out in little pieces and little stories. Like I'll get a hint of a story and then another hint of a story. And typically what's happening in those stories is he's saying like this is how she's responding. This is how she's responding. And I'm looking at, well, this is what you're like, this is the environment that you're creating in that space that you could change that environment and she would respond differently. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. Because like you said at the beginning, right? Some guys say, well, I'll change when she changes. But I think they often forget the role that they play in influencing the environment that the woman's in. And this is why you've seen it, Gerod, right? When you're the CFO
Mhm.
at home, chief fun officer, when you play that role with the kids, what impact does that have on the relationship and the mood in the house?
So my wife is an amazing mother, and as every mother is, they're mama bears, right? So if there's chaos in the house, she's going to protect her cubs. But if there's liveliness and loving and fun and CFO stuff, she's going to come alive too. She's going to want to go play with the cubs as well, and with the papa bear, if you will. So I, I'm a firm believer of leadership. Within the household, but you got to lead your own life first in the right direction before you can start leading your household. And I think that starts with investing in yourself.
hmm Yeah, I mean, when you invest in yourself, on a kind of side note, you by default put a signal out there saying you are worthy of the investment. You are worthy of the time, the attention, the resources. And that is attractive. We've done other podcast episodes on sexual market value, SMV, and the idea that everybody has a sexual market value. And when you're looking to get into a relationship, typically you will look to increase your sexual market value by working out, by looking good, by having your guys might be having the career on point, whatever it is. It's kind of like a marketplace. You want to raise your stock price, right? So you're an attractive stock. And part of the things you do in there is you're investing in yourself. And typically as a relationship goes on and people become complacent and guys maybe stop working out or lose touch with their hobbies and they fall into the trap of codependency, because a lot of these signs of codependency, honestly, as guys, we taught her good things like be a nice guy, people please, make other people happy, lack of boundaries. Well, don't be angry, or don't, you don't want to express yourself in that. You don't want to scare people. So guys often say, well, how do I reinforce a boundary without it sounding like a threat? They don't, goes to the sixth point of poor communication. If there's poor communication, there's a lack of boundaries, needs don't get met, which leads to poor self-esteem. So, this trap, which it really is a trap, I can see why so many guys fall into it, because for the most part, it's taught that's what we need to do in order to create, in order to be a nice guy and treat the woman nicely. Yet at the same time, all that often creates in her is frustration and distrust, because when you're in this cycle of codependency, well, you said it, Mo, before. I'll let you finish that point. When you're in that cycle of codependency, what happens for the woman?
Yeah, I think when we're in that cycle, it feels like there's this weight, right? There's this weight of like, I have to hold him up. I can't even share my stuff because I'm so busy making sure that I'm responsible for shoring up his sense of self. And I think when we get to that place, one, it's just too much, particularly if you have kids as well, and or you're working, like it's just too much to handle. One, we're not made to do that. And so what becomes attractive is when he detaches his emotions from the relationship, and he attaches them to creating his own self-value and worth inside of himself, outside of the relationship. Because then we feel freed up and loosened to be honest, to be open, to be vulnerable. Because we shut down ultimately when he's looking to us to, like, I'm okay if we're okay, right? When we feel the weight of that, it's like, no, I can't hold anymore. It's too overwhelming. It's terrifying.
Yeah, I bet, and it's off. I've heard it so many times when guys that their mood is up when the relationship is up, their mood is down when the relationship is down, to your point, right? Which often can put the burden of their happiness on the woman, which, by default, in order to create polarity and intimacy in the relationship, which kind of going back to the first point, there's got to be a masculine and a feminine, a north and a south. And if the guy is going to waver and allow his mood to be attached to the mood and the state of the relationship, then by default, he has not been steady and he's not been steadfast and grounded. And instead, he's wavering and doubting himself with the changing tides of the relationship, which by default is more feminine in nature. And the woman, to your point, becomes more masculine in nature because she then feels like she has to prop the guy up and she can't fully express herself. And hey, presto, intimacy, be it physical, sexual, whatever, starts to go away.
Yeah. Can I give an example of what it feels like to be in like a reactive where you're watching him be reactive versus like proactive?
Go for it.
So when my husband falls into patterns of codependency, if I literally mutter the words, I don't feel connected. It's like he's off his rocker. He's destabilized. It's all about making sure that, because what he heard was, you suck at making a connection in our relationship. But the reality is, I just wanted to talk about our connection, and why we're off a little bit, or like what's going on here. But when he is like in that place where he's stable and he's taking care of himself, and if I were to say that, he'll say, okay, talk to me about it. What does that look like? What would connection look like to you if we were in like the best place? And what the difference between there is I felt like I could lay my crap on him and he wouldn't like overreact and he wouldn't personalize it. I think that's the big piece of like being in the system of codependency, is like when I'm watching him like personalize everything, it's like, oh my God, I can't even have a conversation with you. This is ridiculous.
Reminds me of last night. I came downstairs and Amelia said, oh, you're just so untrustworthy. And I'm like, ooh, you know what button to press, don't you? Go on then, why am I untrustworthy? You said you'd be done at 6:30 every night this week. I'm like, did I? She's like, yeah. I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't recall saying that. Why else am I trustworthy? And she's like, there's this and there's this. And anyway, long story short, I had a playful conversation, and I think she knew what button to press to just go at it and question my integrity and my word and all that stuff. But anyway, the outcome of it was, because we were able to maintain playfulness, it came full circle. And it just ended with us kind of, just me tickling her and just being stupid, whilst also listening to her complain. But yeah, you naturally you want to recoil to a degree, because you're like, ooh, questioning my word. Oof. No guy wants the word question, do they, Gerod?
No, especially in Texas. Our word is everything. It's how we were built and how we were raised. But your woman wants, and I'm guilty of this, and I'm working on it every day. But your woman wants you to be a lighthouse, right? Okay, but they don't put lighthouses on the beach. They put them on the rock. And so when my wife is emptying her basket or just sharing how she's disappointed in me, or like Amelia with you, it sounds crazy, but I just sit there and repeat in my head, be the rock, be the rock, be the rock. Because if you're not the rock for your wife, you can't be the rock for yourself. You're never going to be able to be the lighthouse into the world if you're not planted firm in who you are. And if she throws a test your way, you waver and you fall. She wants someone that's firm, solid, and knows their worth, because if you don't know your worth and if you can't lead yourself, how are you ever going to lead her?
Exactly.
Yeah, I'd say this is also true in respect to how a woman views her husband interacting with the kids. Like, if he's okay, if they're okay, or like if he starts to go chaotic when they go chaotic, there's also that closing of me, because I feel like you're reactive there. That just is a matter of time before you're reactive with me. And you're not creating a safe, stable place for us. And that can look like shutting down too. Like if a teenager just, shuts down, goes in his room, and we don't see our husband identify or recognize that to engage it, instead of just like kind of going off his handle. I feel like that's also another way that we start to feel that lack of safety in watching him, whatever. It could be any of those patterns, right? A lack of boundaries, poor self-esteem, lack of self-image, anything we see those start to come out with the kids, then it's also like, where are we at? I'm not sure. So
yeah. And I think that lack of emotional safety is a result of the codependency. And this is why we talk a lot about, being a wolf versus deer. Wolf, wise, open, loving, fierce; deer, defend, excuse, explain, react. So okay. So if guys are listening to this and they're resonating with the 9 signs of a codependent relationship, and they can see that they've got some codependency in the relationship, what are some quick fire practical steps they could take today that would help to shift this cycle out of codependency and into more of a relationship where they're leading and co-creating? Well, you can go with one.
The first thing is awareness, knowing which piece of that, and being honest with yourself of where you are at in multiple different relationships. And then digging in and investigating, where did that first start? When is the first time you remember taking on that role of caretaker or people pleaser? Or when do you remember thinking back to when it first started? Because oftentimes you can start to see the pattern once you become aware of when it started and how it's manifests itself.
Okay. Awesome. So first one, become aware. I'll go the second one. So the second thing you can do here is just begin to lead, right? Begin to make decisions that are in your best interests, right? Without seeking permission or approval of anyone, be it your wife, be it someone in your business, be it staff, be it whoever. Just start to make decisions. And this goes back to Gerod's, the podcast we did a couple of podcasts ago on taking a leap, number 467. Just start to lead your life. And I know that might sound vague, but at the same time, if you're resonating with this, I think it'll make sense. The third one, I'll come to you, Gerod.
I would say have vision. You don't know where you're going. You don't really know where you're going unless I'm sorry. You don't know where you're at unless you know where you're going. And having vision and having a path forward for your relationship, even if it can ebb, flow, whatever, but knowing where you want to be is extremely empowering. And there's no way, for me at least, you're ever going to become uncodependent unless you have a vision and a plan to get out of that cycle.
Yeah. And, just on that note, as a bonus one, honestly, you got to invest in getting that support, regardless whether it's with the powerful man or not. It's very difficult to break this pattern on your own because you cannot see your own blind spots. Yeah. You just can't. If you could, you more than likely would have shifted this by now. So get outside support, get a system that's proven, get accountability, ideally from people who are a couple of steps ahead of you, other men as well, because you're worth it and you need it, quite honestly.
Absolutely.
Guys, thank you for being here. It's been a pleasure. As Dougie Fresh says, at the moment of insight, take a massive action. And until next time on the Powerful Man Show, have a terrific day. Guys, again, thank you. And we'll see you soon on the Powerful Man Show.